Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. My name is Giampietro, and I'm an occasional faculty at Elisava. Today, I'm excited to be introducing Rob Giampietro. Many years ago, I first became familiar with Rob's work through Projects, a highly influential New York-based studio he co-ran. Among many cultural projects, their 2011 rebrand of Istanbul's Salt Gallery, a trailblazing project challenging the very limits of identity design itself, was especially influential for me as a Turkish designer. Their studio later received a National Design Award, one of the highest design honors in the US. As a design student, it was common to study essays written by Rob, which would be found in places like ... Emigre magazine, iMagazine, or more extensively at his own platform, linedandonline.com, which now houses 109 entries, including essays, talks, and teaching material he has generously shared. And I often assign a lot of stuff from this website to my students too. So it's linedandonline.com, super hidden treasure in the web. Rob was my teacher and advisor at the Rhode Island School of Design's graduate program. And unlike anyone I have ever interacted, Rob had a way of descending into the utter chaos of my mind and within only 15 minutes make complete sense of what I'd been trying to articulate for the past 3 years. He would end the session with a library of references to keep me going. Working with Rob was like working with a design psychic. Since then, Rob became director of design at MoMA, where he helped reimagine the museum's identity for its historic 2019 expansion, guided by the philosophy of making the design 100% better by making it 3% different. At Google, Rob held several directorial positions. Among his many contributions, he co-founded a human-centered design research team tackling topics such as responsible AI and many other things that he will talk about today. He also led the launch of design.google.com and the overhaul of Google Fonts library. Today, Rob is head of creative at Notion, leading multiple teams working across design, strategy, and communication. We're lucky to have such a rigorous thinker in our industry and here with us tonight. So that being said, please join me in welcoming Rob Giampietro.
Thank you so much, Tim. That is such a kind introduction, and I'm honored to be here with you tonight. Hola, Barcelona. Thank you for having me in this wonderful series, so many inspiring designers for me. And thank you to Mark and Elisava for hosting this event and bringing me here at the Design Museum. Very grateful to be here with you tonight. Gracias. So this talk takes a brief look back at about 20 years of my work. I promise it will be brief. But it's crazy to think that actually all of it has happened since my last visit to Barcelona in 2000. So it covers everything I've made since I last was here. So it's a really nice homecoming. And since then, as Cem mentioned, I founded studios, led studios, worked at Google, worked at MoMA, and I'll try to share some highlights from these experiences. But this week also marked 2 years for me at Notion. And in that time, my team has grown, and we've done some work that I'm really proud of. So I'll save a little bit of my time to reflect on that as well. It hasn't been all work, though, for me. On the side, I've been celebrating the art of photography with the Aperture Foundation and book design with AIGA and 50 Books, 50 Covers, trying to create community, spend time in creative residencies for myself and restoring my own creative inputs, developing my writing and teaching, and lots of other areas outside of client and in-house work. So for the students out there, make sure you maintain a balance between your work and your passions. I try to wear many hats. But enough of my resume, let's look at some work together. So for my first studio, Giampietro and Smith, we did a lot of work in the art world and also in global health. And this included work on the UN's first Millennium Development Goals report, which is shown here, work that included a lot of data visualization, photo editing, and publication design in multiple languages, creating a structure that could be read by policymakers and research librarians alike. I also know Brian Collins was here last week with OFF in this very room, I believe, which is kind of exciting. He's a mentor of mine. But we worked with him on this very special effort to try to bring the Olympics in 2012 to New York City. And my studio, Giampietro Smith, designed this ad campaign that was really meant to get New Yorkers excited about the possibility of the Olympics and to rally around this idea. Michael Bloomberg, who was the mayor, donated 80% of the unused ad space in New York City to make this campaign possible. And for a few weeks, these ads were absolutely everywhere. I couldn't even get on the subway without seeing my own work, which was a strange experience. But we used the language of the Olympic Charter to try to kind of lift people's spirits, and seeing it unfurl in front of the New York Public Library still gives me goosebumps. A few years into my practice at Giampietro and Smith, I started to get more excited about doing things online. And so, as Cem mentioned, I created a site called Lined and Unlined in 2006 that was not a portfolio of design work, but a portfolio of writing and teaching and ideas. It includes all my syllabi from 15 years of teaching at Parsons, RISD, SVA, a little bit like, and one of those that is my favorite is this picture of my syllabus structure, which is a sort of a guideline for a thesis project. And so if you're a student, it might be a good place to take a look and find inspiration for information about design. And early on in running the blog, I looked for different ways to connect with people through both digital and non-digital efforts. One week I actually took the blog offline completely and did a project called Posts by Post, mailing postcards to all of my readers around the world in a kind of in real life version of the blog. So these are some artifacts from that. I joined the board of a nonfiction quarterly called Topic and was the designer of it. It was founded by my friend David Haskell, who's now the editor-in-chief of New York Magazine, and I designed it with my friend Stella Bugbee, who's now the head of the New York Times Style section. So it's amazing sometimes when you make friends early in your life, they go on to do incredible things, and you get to do really special projects with them together while you're all coming up in the world. And I've also always been really interested in kind of work that's sort of adjacent to design, that's maybe adjacent to literature, that's adjacent to art and installation. And one of those is trying to bring the worlds of poetry and computation together, reviving a nascent poetic form used a few times in his life by the Fluxus poet Emmett Williams, who's down in the lower left-hand corner of this slide, especially in his book Sweethearts. So this form takes a root word and finds what are called Williams words inside of it. So, within the word spray paint is the word ain't, for example. And these words, because their phonemes aren't rearranged, they vibrate both visually against one another and verbally. And it's a very unique style of poetry that he actually discovered these words often through the use of a computer. And I replicated that algorithm in the way that I do it as well. For the New York Art Book Fair one year, I did a $1 zine with the root word Washington for George Washington on the $1 bill. And for the Utrecht Biennial, I did a collaboration with Jurg Lenny's spray paint printer machine called Hector with the root word spray paint. When I got to projects, a lot of my teaching at SVA, helping Debbie Millman establish the Masters in Branding program there, manifested into research we did first for Artist Space on the role of identities in the arts, which is an essay you can read on Lined and Unlined. And then later for the work we did for the art space SALT, which actually applied a lot of those ideas to an actual project, which was really exciting. And as Cem mentioned, the identity that we used was a typeface, but it sort of functioned as a virtual and distributed gallery, where the letters SALT were sort of spaces that we could reinstall periodically over time and reimagine with different global typographers. And because they changed periodically, it created these sort of mismatched layers of institutional graphics and history on the website, on publications, in the visitor experience, in the campus signage even. So when different parts of the campus would be remodeled, they would have mismatched typefaces. And it just created an incredible patina of energy and creativity for this institution. And those ideas continued to reverberate for the RISD Museum, where we developed a new brand and did extensive work on the website to bring their collection to life in new and expected ways, lessons that would actually come back to me later on at MoMA with MoMA.org. And instead of a typeface, we actually developed a monogram, this kind of spatialized M for museum that could be projected, remapped, and even we kind of half seriously suggested built and installed as an art space, which you can see here. For the Cooper Hewitt National Design Museum and the Walker Art Center, we adapted Andrew Blauvelt and Ellen Lupton's decade-long survey, Graphic Design Now in Production, for a temporary Cooper Hewitt museum on Governor's Island, while the museum's home, a Carnegie Mansion on the Upper East Side, was under renovations. So we instead showed this show for the Cooper Hewitt in an army barracks on Governor's Island. And the show actually included our work for SALT, which was really exciting, as well as an original essay that I wrote called School Days. And that essay is also online. It's also shown here. And it explored the influence of graphic design programs in the formation of designers' identities and careers, contrasting it with similar types of programs in art school and creative writing over a similar period of time. So these projects that bring writing and design together continued for a special issue for Print magazine that I edited with Prem Krishnamurthy, who was my partner at Project Projects, about the role of collaboration in the creative field. We organized a roundtable discussion made up of collaborative practices from many different backgrounds, and the transcript of that starts on the cover of the magazine. And then along the way, we commissioned writing about artists that we thought were particularly collaborative in their practices, artists like Alison Knowles, the filmmaker Jonas Mekas, institutions like Artist Space, and design and art collectives like Athletics and Group Material, and even printers like Linko, a family-owned affordable newspaper printer in Long Island City that's been used by artists and writers for many years. Headlines in the magazine were set in unreleased typefaces from some of our favorite design collaborators, and every single contributor, including all of our interns and photographers and everybody, were thanked in the credits. So it was just sort of this explosion of collaboration. And sometimes my work is more about presenting the writing and editorial work of other people, like the website that I designed for the Architectural History Collaborative Aggregate. Their thematic ideas of inquiry combined with research to build structures, almost like these little houses that are made of modular parts based on the kind of content of the essays. So structures and scenes and this kind of community ideas that come together in a kind of typographic skyline that creates an entry point for discovery on the site. With my grad students at RISD, we did a 48-hour weekend workshop to mine the form of the printed circuit with a book bound with wire loops that could be experienced in a random access way, and punctuated statements from computer code that helped to pace and organize the students' research efforts related to their thesis work. And I always love when there's some kind of incompleteness in a work of design, something where you're able to be the one that sees it all come together, where your presence helps witness an idea being brought fully to life. And a small example of that is how these entry graphics worked at MoMA, where you enter through the sliding glass doors of an exhibition that then kind of turns into a complete title. Or here, where the space and color that's sort of suggestive of concrete poetry and the warmth of the southern sun doesn't quite move, but it suggests a kind of movement and comes together in your mind's eye. I arrived at MoMA in 2018 in a moment of real excitement. The museum was adding a new wing, giving it 30% more gallery space to show an expanded collection representing a more inclusive global modernism that would rotate more frequently, giving you more reasons to come back to the museum. The internal galleries were renovated by Diller Scofidio and Renfro, and it was affectionately known as the new MoMA. And this logo had already evolved when I arrived, which was following a typographic effort by Christian Schwartz to kind of bring a lot of Gothic, MoMA's always used Franklin Gothic, but a lot of Gothic typefaces for MoMA together in a kind of more streamlined way. But with my collaborators at the Brooklyn Studio Order, we brought the typeface and logo to life in motion, unifying it with a seasonal strategy that the museum was starting to adopt that went from showing single shows to groups of shows over an entire season. And those were unified by kind of a modular system of stacking pieces that included artwork, artist names, quotes, show names, logo stripes, and even images of life at the museum all kind of colliding into one. So here you can see how we would take those different elements and build them out into these stacks, and those could be both stacked and sliced. They could be, as in this street pole banner, they could also be woven together into these kind of patchwork quilts, and also animated for social media and Instagram and things like that. Over the 2 years that I was a design director there, we redesigned literally every touch point and refreshed it. So tickets, gallery ephemera, even our much beloved visitor map and guide to the collections. And also every sign on campus was also reinstalled and documented comprehensively in these guidelines. We had one for brand, one for motion, and the one I'm showing you here is for our signage system. So you can see here literally how you fabricate the signs, how you order the signs, which signage goes on which substrates, our use of progressive disclosure to kind of help share more information with you as you move closer to a site, the citing of all the signs. So this was a really, really comprehensive project. that we kind of left behind as an institutional legacy for the museum to continue to use over time. And here, some of the digital and physical signage that we created comes together in a single moment. This is right in the members check-in area. You can see those kind of like slimline ticket displays mixed with some silkscreen graphics on the far wall and the program wall that's inviting you to sort of scan everything that's going on in the museum at the front, as well as the ticket kiosks that help you get your ticket. Every element of those was designed by my teams at MoMA. And finally, we welcomed audiences back to the renovated museum by creating a campaign that showed people experiencing MoMA for themselves. And this is one of the images from that campaign. It's a photo of a young boy whose kind of whirls of red hair kind of mirror the famous Van Gogh painting that he's looking at. And it was sort of an accident. He was a cousin of one of our art directors, and he really was kind of mesmerized by Starry Night, but it's still one of my favorites. So on either side of my time at MoMA, both before and after, I worked on some life-changing projects at Google as well. And one effort was called Google Design, which was aimed to share and advocate for Google's own design work to a global audience of designers, with both a website, which we helped to launch when I got there, as well as physical activations of all kinds. One of them was this end-of-the-year gift box, which we sent to designers around the world to share some of our favorite stories of the year in Google Design. And another of those projects, a really important one to me, was SPAN, Conversations About Design and Technology, which was an event that connected designers and technologists in cities around the world, from London to LA, Tokyo to Mexico City, and they were really like curated salons that helped unpack themes around design's cutting edge. Every year, we really carefully selected both the audience and the speakers, and we published a reader on the occasion of that collected writing and interviews to amplify their work. And this is the first year of the reader that was designed by Chad Klopfer very beautifully for us. I hosted and programmed the first set of conferences in New York and London, as well as the second year in Tokyo and LA, welcoming speakers as varied as a MacArthur Genius Grant-winning stone carver, a pair of really ambitious architectural theorists, a hardware design instructor, a postmodern design pioneer, a VR game designer, and many more. And outside of conversations around community, my team at Google also looked at ways to expand tools for design, especially Google Fonts, which we relaunched in 2016. The directory experience used Google's material design components, and it was the first product that actually had been designed within the material design team. So other teams at Google were using these components, but we ourselves were designing them but not using them to make products, so this is the first product we made with our own components. And we tried in doing this to sort of really elevate higher quality open source typography, making it easier for everyone, whether you're a designer or a non-designer, to find and combine fonts and to do the different things you want, whether it's just doing your blog, making a brand, or even like materials for the local PTA. Everyone uses Google Fonts. We launched fonts from designers we loved also, like Space Mono from Span Speakers Colophon, which a decade later I'm really happy to see is an iconic global hit. I get resumes every day from designers in Space Mono, a typeface that we helped to launch. We also worked to bring Google's design story to new audiences as well. So when the London Design Museum organized a show on design from California, I partnered with them. One of the curators of that show was one of our speakers at Span in London, and we mobilized 13 works from Google's collection, including some of the paper icon lighting maquettes we used for Google product icons, as well as a full-scale self-driving car prototype to help bring some of our work and ideas to the public. And eventually, my work on material design also helped to take the new capabilities in our design system, particularly the ability to theme components to better express your brand and material, right to Google's own apps in Android and iOS. And this effort was called Google Material, and it really looked at Google's brand, which was colors on white, and the new logo that we had launched back in 2015, and helped bring some of that brand idea to components that you use in the apps every day. So whether those were like Google-branded tappable action buttons like this colorful plus here, or bottom sheets like moving some of the UI to be easier within reach of your hand, or even having whiter, simpler, and more responsive layouts for Gmail, Maps, and Google Drive, and much more. So I actually saw the Super G, like a couple days ago, was actually made more gradient-y recently to kind of welcome in the Gemini and AI era, which was interesting to see. We even created a new typeface for this effort called Google Sans, which evoked the Google logo, so it was sort of designed to remind you of the Google logo when the Google logo wasn't present. And it was launched it helped you activate titles and page states in the UI. We also made color more accessible, and the components were engineered so that Google product teams could easily build them into their applications. And later at Google, I joined a team that brought together different pockets of designers in their research and machine intelligence efforts into a single AI UX team, which was the first of its kind. And we worked closely with the hardware and pixel teams to prototype on-device experiences using transcription and telephony to screen phone calls, which I think, let me see if I can roll. Yeah, and then also a rolling camera buffer to help you select better photos called Top Shot, and also visual entity detection to take actions in the real world like calling a phone number or clicking a link. So these all use sensors on your device and artificial intelligence and prediction to make it easier for you to use your phone and interact with the world. So all of that, I think, all of that work before brings me to Notion. And I think, there's a lot more I would love to share from that time, from those years before, but I also really was excited and passionate to share new work with you today. And that's why I wanted to reflect a little bit on what brought me here and where it's going next. So I first came to Notion as a user, and I was learning along with the rest of the world on YouTube during the pandemic. There were so many of us that were sort of trying to do things while we were trapped at home, like organize our library books or just like make our home a little bit more intelligent. So I brought all my books that I love to collect books. I brought all my books into a relational database in Notion, and it was so much better than the Google Sheet I was using before. I also used it to help me plan my garden and figure out which plants I needed to put in the shade or in the sun, and when they would bloom, and how tall they would get, and what colors they would be, and how to mix and match them together. So just as a practical life user, I was really loving the tool. And at MoMA, we were also really inspired by Notion around the same time. We created this sub-brand for MoMA members. It was one of the last projects I got to do there. And we partnered with the illustrator Nicholas Menard, who is actually a very good friend of our Notion art director, Roman Muradov. And these were inspired by historical illustrations from MoMA's archives, but they were also very inspired by Notion's iconic brand. And I came to Notion via Google's Search UX team. And there we were working on public knowledge graphs. So for example, on the left here, how like the director Steven Spielberg is related to other actors and films and institutions. But Notion allowed users to make private knowledge graphs with the same kind of information from their work and lives. So how my flowers are related to my garden, or how my books are related to the bookshelves that they're sitting on. And it went even further, not just graphing knowledge, but also process, so workflows that you have in your work, but also on the right, an example of a workflow of photosynthesis, so literally how plants make energy. And the fact that you can use the same kind of graph network to do those two things is really powerful. You can see how this concept would easily allow for actions, automations, and predictions, all of the elements of AI, to act on top of the knowledge that these knowledge networks contain. And so Notion seemed to be sort of edging us towards a revolution in how we think about the architecture of knowledge at work. And so not a physical environment of change at work, but a conceptual one. And much like the revolution created by Herman Miller's action office concept, designed by Robert Prost in 1968, it did away with rigid boundaries and immovable concepts of what came before it. Instead of rigid SaaS tools that are made for you, we have really flexible software Lego blocks that you can use to build tools for yourself. So flash forward to today, and I lead the creative team at Notion, and the lights are bright, but just out of curiosity, has anyone heard of Notion here? Raise your hand if so, I'd love to see. Oh my gosh, I love it. I love seeing so many hands in the audience. Thank you for being users. I see this passion everywhere I go, and it's maybe a bit odd because it's productivity software. It's not like, it's not like TikTok or Instagram or something like that. It's actually something you use to write docs and sheets with. But my team is ever-changing, and over the 2 years I've been at Notion, I've managed teams that do web design, web engineering, a studio team that includes illustrators, filmmakers, and brand designers. I lead campaigns and strategy and operations for major launches, as well as, even for a little period of time, comms, content, and PR. So it's really been everything under the sun. But we also try to have a lot of fun. Last year, we stopped by to meet some illustrators and friends of our in-house illustrator, Roman Muradov. We made prints at New York City's oldest print shop at the South Street Seaport, and we tried to draw some inspiration from the life and work of Isamu Noguchi at the Noguchi Museum in Queens. When I think about leading Notion's brand as a creative leader, I think the simplest way to explain it is that it's a place where illustration and identity intersect. We try to solve problems of identity and positioning often through an illustration lens. And we're not the first ones to do this, of course. My colleague Hui Vu, who leads our brand design team, worked at Casper, and they did this beautifully a few years back. MailChimp, designed by Brian Collins at Collins, is another example of this. But the pared back and conceptual feelings of all of these illustrations recall the pages of The New Yorker to a lot of people. And Notion gets that comparison a lot too. And funny enough, Ramon did work for The New Yorker a while ago, so no surprise. But I also thought it would be interesting for this talk to take a moment to look a little further back at how illustration and cartooning, while they may be a little less common in brand systems right now, have a long history in building commercial awareness. Susan Sontag talks about the origins of the poster in terms of promotion, so promoting things for commercial purposes, and persuasion, persuading people for political purposes. And some of our greatest artists have actually lent a hand to helping establish brands, like Toulouse-Lautrec for the Moulin Rouge, Andy Warhol for Simonetti gloves, Paul Rand for El Producto cigars, and Fortunato Depero's legendary work for Campari. And brands like Pirelli have made the idea of simply having illustrations part of their iconic quality. So here the many uses of Pirelli's rubber, from tires to wires to hot pads, are all brought to life through an ever-changing cast of illustrators and artists. And illustration can also bring a sense of play and familiarity to difficult topics, like these posters for public safety, which would be hard to imagine if they were photographic. They're so evocative and memorable, and part of that is because they're illustrations. And illustration is also deeply integrated with the history of the office, from pens like Bic and Pentel to Olivetti's typewriters. And in the 70s and 80s, it wasn't uncommon to see a major brand evolution stem primarily from the use of illustration and art direction. So Wolf Allens, and particularly Michael Wolff, who has a great new book out that I was drawing some of this inspiration from, were at the forefront of this. Here's one great example from their portfolio of a paint brand being completely reimagined through the use of an illustrated mascot of a fox. Super iconic, super beautiful, super memorable. And of course, it all goes back to The New Yorker once again. Wolf Allens also found inspiration from that magazine to work with the likes of Charles Barsotti for the office supply brand Nice Day. And I actually remember picking these up somewhere in my youth. Barsotti's archives at Texas State University show some of the back and forth between the art directors at Wolf Allens and himself in developing this brand. And here they're thinking a little bit about how this playful dog mascot is going to interact with the staples inside this box, which started off as croquet hoops and then became hurdles on a kind of obstacle course. And this is very similar to how we develop illustration at Notion today. So here are some of Ramon's illustrated notes and thoughts towards the development of Notion AI, a character that we affectionately call Nosy. And last year, we did an event with the Eames Institute, and I know Lisa Dimitrios was here a few months ago, so that's really exciting. But Ramon and I actually published an interview on this topic about how drawing is a kind of language for us and how we use it at Notion, and what the process of revision and development of illustrations is like. So it's reminding me that I need to get that online soon so you guys can check it out. So while Notion's brand is driven by illustration, both the rich history of illustration and graphic design and identity making, and also in our own memories of illustration from the picture books and experiences that we had as children, bringing those pieces together has allowed us over the past 2 years to expand our brand expression from a single core brand to many expressions and an ever-growing landscape of products and experiences. And this slide here has really become my map for running the Notion brand. And we'll use it today in a couple different ways to look at how some of those experiences and styles came to life. And we'll start with 2 products that didn't exist when I joined Notion 2 years ago, which is calendar and mail. So if I'd have more time, I'd love to show you the hundreds and hundreds of variations we made to arrive at this icon for Notion Calendar, which evolved from Notion's acquisition of the app Cron. But on this slide, I just want to show you really quickly how the art direction of Calendar is inspired by the actual events on the UI, these calendar events that you put in throughout your day all the time. And we use that as a container shape to put these illustrated tonal icons that represent the mixture of your work and your life together and help you keep those things in balance. And last month, we also launched Notion Mail to the world after a preview in the fall. And the art direction here plays with the sort of proto-printmaking technique of the rubber stamp, which is, of course, part of seeing an old-fashioned envelope or mail, but it also gives the texture and the warmth that complements illustrations in other areas of our product family. So those are 2 quick examples, but there are a few more. So zooming back out, let's go back to the core brand for a moment. When I arrived at Notion, this was how I was used to seeing Ramon's illustrations. They were small, they were full body, they were uncropped, and they were often interacting with frames or elements of a page or a website. And in the grammar of visual storytelling, particularly in film, often in the course of telling a story, you go from a full shot where you see a full body to something closer, like an extreme close-up. And I realized that this kind of framing could actually help us tell the next chapter of our story at Notion, which is really about bringing AI tools into the app more fully. So this is a billboard from last year's Think It, Make It campaign in the spring. And you can see here how we're much closer to the character. We can see her expression, her moment of reflection, some of the inner workings of her mind, the things she's dreaming about and trying to accomplish. These are some early studies we did with our agency Buck for this campaign. And here you can see the idea of the close-up profile starting to come to life and being so important. And we loved it because it showed the mind at work, the complex processes and workflows that Notion can help you with, and the ways that AI can give you a boost in managing projects and tasks. And we were inspired for this by many different sources, from Rube Goldberg's humorous cartoons of totally absurd machines, to Picasso's ambitious use of flattened perspective in his Cubist portraits, some of which were wonderful to see at the Picasso Museum earlier today for me. The profile is also often associated with the brain or mind at work. So Milton Glazer's poster of Bob Dylan being one example, and to this we added the legacy of comics that use strong graphic devices like Batman here, as well as manga. We looked at the Russian constructivist posters, like this one from Rodchenko, that conveyed an image of tomorrow and a kind of call to a revolutionary future, like a revolution in the way that we work and are creative at work. And we brought all of this together around various motifs. So Notion as a peaceful, productive, calm space where you can think and dream, and a place to feel confident, accomplished, and optimistic. Tomorrow's tools today. Free your mind to do great things. It's a kind of knowledge. Notion is kind of knowledge or library, knowledge base or library that helps support your own mind and the collective mind of your team. So it's a sort of knowledge library. And this is a sort of place where you can get every question answered. Or you can even share perfect memory without ever speaking a word. So, something someone wrote on your team can help you answer a question without ever bothering them with it. Perfect memory for every team. So here's a little bit of what it looked like in the world. Let's see if this moves. Okay, great. So we had subway takeovers, digital displays. This is in Seoul, in the Tube. I think more Seoul. So yeah, just bringing this out into the world and sort of bringing energy of the brand and awareness out into the streets. The 30-second ad featured a group building something together, represented here by this simple block castle, and how Notion supported their journey in getting there by unlocking creativity and play on the team. The title of the ad was I Want to Play. And here's that ad at Shibuya Crossing in Tokyo. And one thing moving closer allowed us to do was to have stronger color and contrast in our ads. So when you're far away from a character and you have large white fields, you can see how a billboard gets really washed out. It's hard to even tell where the Notion billboard is in this image. But how about now? It's a lot more recognizable. And it's worth mentioning here that Notion's logo, the alphabet block, actually started out as an illustration itself. So last year I caught up with its originator, Sun Helen Calvinius, art director in Norway, to learn a little bit about how she developed it with our CEO, Ivan, in the early days of Notion. And after hundreds of typed options didn't work for our tagline, our final tagline actually also arrived as an illustration, part of a mock-up from our collaborators at Buck. And so I love seeing these two pieces together in the campaign. Think it, make it. It's a power combo. We activated this on the web and in 11 cities around the world. It was over 500 million impressions with really fun placements like this, and this, and this. So going back to this map for a moment, there's a reason why you don't see campaign visuals on here. And that's because campaigns exist a little bit off to the side. They're not really a permanent brand asset. They come and go, and we kind of reimagine them all the time. And so for another campaign around the idea of AI-powered search, which launched initially as Notion Q&A, we had this simple idea of a Q and an A that became friends. So almost like Sesame Street would when you were a kid and they were like sponsored by different letters of the alphabet. And so we asked Ramon to help develop these characters. We imagined them as a kind of odd couple like Laurel and Hardy or Ernie and Bert. They were like different but lovable. And at one point, Q's questions find their answers inside of A's brain. So we kind of zoom into the counterform of the A to see what's happening in his brain. And here's us starting to develop that idea. But later we worked actually with our AI engineering team to visualize this process a little better, kind of closer to what's actually going on inside of a search, using weighted searches and what are called RAG, or retrieval augmented generation, an AI technique to help you find answers in your Notion workspace. And so even though there's a lot of technical knowledge behind this, I think these abstractions with dots and lines also remind me a little bit of like the memories in Inside Out, or even Norman MacLean's like beautiful abstract animations from the 60s for Canadian TV. Here's how they came together. A storyboard. And we try to capture every launch also in like a single sticker, so you can see my laptop here is covered with them. But with a little help from Notion Q&A, we can see that, or from Notion AI, Q&A are friends again, and they're holding hands in this sticker. So one more campaign to share. For Notion Sites last summer, we had this simple idea that it's the fastest way to make a website. That was the pitch. Oops, excuse me. Making websites is way too hard right now, and Notion makes it a whole lot easier. So here's how it kind of came to life on the page, using images of like a sudden wind or a strong gust of wind, racing flags that are like helping you cross the finish line even faster, an artist that's in the middle of their work. This is my favorite one. We're even giving the turtle a boost here, or trying to hold on for dear life because our tool is so fast. And for this, we were actually inspired by a whole range of sources, from Red Bull's Gives You Wings cartoons, to futurist images of speeding motorcycles, to Memorex's iconic campaign, Is It Real or Is It Memorex, or even the Hokusai classic print, A Sudden Gust of Wind. So like illustration, because it's drawn from image making, can be drawn from such a huge range of sources. Outside of campaigns, though, there are many ways of representing faces in illustrated cartooning, and sometimes it's with the faces of our core brand, but this January, we gave every Notion user the tool to represent themselves with Notion faces. So at Notion, we have a long tradition of doing illustrated portraits with our employees. Ivan and Simon, our co-founders, actually had Ramon illustrate their faces for Notion's original About page. And our community really wanted these faces too, and we used to joke with them that the only way that they could get one was to get a job at Notion. But in spite of that, they made their own solutions, like these avatar generators, that were well-meaning but not the highest quality. And meanwhile, we also illustrated more and more people from our team, and as we did that, we found it was harder and harder to tell those people apart. So you can see in this other image, like a bunch of people looking kind of similar, so if you're trying to see on Slack who's writing to you, it's hard to tell. And we had some ideas for how to make this a little bit more modular using a portrait generator. We had mocked versions of this up in Photoshop and in Figma. But to represent our users around the world, we also thought it would take years, potentially, to illustrate all the different pieces and parts we would need. And so we even, at one point, explored AI to try to help us generate these illustration pieces. But in the end, we worked with Buck again to review almost a dozen avatar generators like Apple's Memoji, and try to figure out what we would need to truly allow users to represent themselves around the world. We have a very global user base. And so we turned our dot screens to support emoji like skin tones and a different scale, and we even wrote PRDs for all the different ways we need the tool to work, and developed a kind of complex layering system that allows you to make a really robust and rich Notion face. So here are some of the millions of variations, and you can definitely build your own at faces.notion.com. Please do. It's a fun thing to do. You can make lots of them. You can make some that look like you and some that don't. It's totally up to you. One of the biggest areas we needed to actually create was hair. So we wound up creating over a few hundred different hairstyles, and there are over 500 new hand-drawn elements on top of the 200 that we had already created from our internal experiments. And this is a little bit of how it works. And I think what's really key is that we moved away from the idea of likeness. We didn't need to make a portrait that looks like you. We moved toward this idea of expression. We wanted a tool that allows you to express who you are. So this means more expressive faces, more silly props, more ways to stand out rather than to blend in. And combined with the idea of black and white and a pared back aesthetic, a lot of the details that are challenges for other avatar generators actually get simplified and resolved. New Year's is always a big holiday for us at Notion, and people are setting goals and trying to roll up their sleeves and get more productive. So we launched Faces on New Year's on LinkedIn. And people were loving changing their profile pics and having a new year, new you, making multiplayer collaboration tools like Notion a lot more fun and creative. They loved sharing their goals for the year and creating new portraits. And we even got one of LinkedIn's biggest influencers, Snoop Dogg, in on the fun. He has a huge following, small business owners, and he was really gracious to make a portrait and give us a shout out. We designed Notion Faces to help you extend your Notion identity across our family of products. So from commenting in Notion to scheduling something in Calendar to sending a note in Notion Mail or publishing a template as a creator in our marketplace. It helps you carry your Notion identity to all those different places. Next, let's look at another face. This one has no mouth, and it talks in text and looks very different from the humans that it works alongside. It's Notion AI, or Nosy. So when I got to Notion, we were one of the first to launch AI features in our space. Notion AI was actually launched in alpha ahead of even ChatGPT. And at the time, our launch got a lot of attention for its use of magic and sparkles. You can see it up here on the right. But then everyone else started getting in on the sparkle action too, which was not so good. People started to notice. And we realized last year that we needed something new, and we also needed something that was a little bit more us. So enter Nosy. And the process of creating Nosy actually started a few weeks after my arrival. We were looking for ways for the brand and the product to evolve, and we had a bunch of jam sessions with our CEO, Ivan, and we started looking at a way of creating a personality that brought all of our AI touch points together. And it really seemed like a tantalizing opportunity for illustration. How could cartooning and illustration actually support this idea? And we were really inspired by Steinberg's masks, by Japanese theater, by Bruno Minari's wonderful illustrations, and even by Susan Kerr's iconic Mac Finder logo, which I think itself is indebted to Picasso a little bit. And Ramon began sketching and writing about some of these ideas, and these expanded into workshops with myself, with Ryo Liu on the product design side, Linus Lee from our AI team, and also Ivan, our CEO. And again, we just sort of kept drawing from references, like what did we want this character to look like? What do we want this character to feel like? Was it more like Matisse or Picasso, more like Tintin? These are some other sketches just exploring kind of a wilder range of abstract ideas, or trying to refine the shape of a brow or the style of the face. And this is us kind of refining the final geometry with some precise kind of crafting of the eye movements. It's amazing to watch Ramon work with all the precision. Nothing escapes his attention. And these are some early animation tests that we started to try for ourselves. But we actually thought, we needed this to be really robust and performant in the product. And we also really wanted it to be alive and feel alive. That was an important part of our brief. So we turned back to our team at Buck. We told them we wanted a stateful, nonlinear animation style for Nosy. It needed to respond to AI states that would pass through it, like thinking, reading, searching, or writing. And to do those states in a way that were being run by software. So not that you were seeing sort of linear loops of animation, but they were actually dynamic and changing with the changing state of the product. Some of these we also used in static applications. It's fun to see them in print where they're so expressive. But we also tested how it felt to chain these states together and how they looked at both full resolution and in a small screen like the mobile app here. So here you can see Nosy sort of interpolating between these different states. We also tested performance in a lot of different technical platforms like Lottie and Rive. And Rive actually won out for being both lighter and more like a gaming engine in terms of its capabilities. And we love the way that Duolingo uses Rive as well, and we were really inspired by that. Here you can see the AI states passing through and kind of being toggled on and off, and how Rive actually uses a kind of decision flowchart to animate Nosy and bring him to life. And here you can see a little bit of how the whole experience comes together in the Notion app. So we are writing, we are approving things, we're invoking Nosy and adding something. So it just kind of pops up in these little moments and helps you remember that you're using AI. And it's so expressive, we even designed it to just be visible with half of a face. Just some eyes can bring a billboard to life. And our community and Fast Company loved it too. The last area I wanted to talk about was where we use illustration in our events, and we have a couple of these. One is called First Block, which celebrates startups and startups culture and brings real-life lessons to growing a business to life with the founders that help make it happen. So this is called First Block. And the name and the visuals were actually drawn from Notion's Add Block button. We added some cartooned UI elements on top to bring it all together. You can see season 1 on YouTube now, and I particularly recommend this great interview with our co-founders, Ivan, Simon, and Akshay, both if you're curious about Notion or if you're a super fan. Another event that we support is called Cafe Notion, which translates our core brand into like a hospitality and cafe-like experience. So we have the stencil typeface, these mocha colors, and the illustrations are all kind of brought together to help us make scrappy graphics on the road and create the idea of a cafe full of like smart, intelligent software helpers. And Notion is all about good coffee. And for graphics, yes, we make sandwich boards and even drink stencils as a creative team, so we do it all. I love these coasters and this super cool brown paper bag. Sometimes it's all about the merch. And these experiences with First Block and Cafe Notion helped us to build an even bigger conference and event for our users last year. We call that event Make with Notion, and we're coming back again this year to San Francisco and around the world on a live stream, so please join us if you can in September. But like our other sub-brands, Make with Notion is actually also inspired by illustration. And to contrast our core brand that's really heavy, that's heavily used at the event brand uses a simple idea of tangrams to contrast with basic shapes. And so these are a simplified form of illustration. I'm sure we've all made tangram illustrations as kids to translate the kind of fun and open-ended way that our audience is invited to build and make things along with us at the event. And got to work closely again with my friends at Order to help develop these shapes, colors, and textures into the initial animation to bring the identity to life. And this is a little bit of our work in kind of getting the event design started. And our event tagline actually draws from Timmy, Think It, Make It, to sort of talk about tomorrow's tools, that billboard that I showed you earlier. This is the microsite and how it all kind of comes together. So you can see these tangram shapes mixed with kind of playful, almost like hand-placed. We're always like fixing a block or trying to align it or adjust it, and showing that kind of informality against kind of the more rigid system of blocks in Notion. So once we had a brand, it was time to actually make it a space, and we wanted to bring the feeling of the Notion office to our Pier 27 venue last year. And that meant some of our wonderful iconic furniture, like actually bringing it from our office to the event, as well as creating a warm, light-filled environment that helped inspire you to do great things. We were particularly drawn to kind of modern installation artwork like this work from Robert Irwin at Chinati on the left from Marfa, Texas. And you can see in this installation how these scrims kind of come to life on the right at Make with Notion. So like kind of really inspired by the Irwin and kind of translating those ideas to our event. In addition to the scrims making lightweight, flexible walls, we also embraced warm neutrals of cardboard as a simple, humble way to build things, kind of very childlike way to build things. I'm sure we all took a box as kids and built things with it. So again, playful, unexpected, and also a very sustainable way to create a conference environment. Pier 27, our venue, is actually a Homeland Security site. When you're not having an event there, cruise ships dock there, and people need to go through metal detectors as they enter the United States. So we needed to design a plan that could be built and taken down in 36 hours over 2 floors. And here I was very fortunate to work again with my collaborators on SPAN, Kathy Johnson and Rebecca Rudolph from the architecture firm Design Bitches, or as I call them, DB. So you can see the floor plan there. DB helped us harness all these ideas together in a material palette for the event. The cardboard, the scrims, curtains that kind of help create these soft environments, as well as materials from our offices and more. And we did 3D scans of the entire space and rendered these ideas across all areas of the event. So here you can see the scrims, the signs, and the elements of our welcome desk starting to come together. We modeled crowd size and flow through the space and ultimately brought it to life on Pier 27. And we also took over the adjacent plaza to be able to sort of bring the brand outside. The weather was incredible. There was an amazing view of the bridge. And as you arrived, you got to pick up your badge and see this incredible kind of cardboard wall made of kind of the oversized blocks and shapes that brought you to the event. And we actually used Ramboard. It's a material for protecting hardwood floors when they're under construction to do this. And had this stack of tiles that we were able to really quickly install. And we were able to do that with a lot of really careful planning and CAD work to help us get everything up and activate. I love events because it's like they come up and they come down in just like a few hours. It's really incredible. So fun to see people enjoying the space, enjoying each other at the event, enjoying the beautiful view, and even seeing our signage and our brand extend this from the Instagram and promotional materials into the space. And here they are in real life, and then a few weeks before at our conference room in New York, kind of trying to figure out the scale and everything like that, just like at MoMA. Our furniture from the office also felt like an exhibition. It was so unique, this eclectic mix of chairs and things that really help people express different identities and personalities that they bring to our product. And we also tried to create some spaces that were a little more unexpected and invited you to gather in different ways. This is sort of like a sandbox or a playground for adults. And we were worried that people wouldn't use these spaces, actually, but they certainly did. And our creators actually especially loved them and hung out there throughout the day. So there was we have so many blocks at Notion, we just needed some round forms too. We even had cardboard bookshelves for our swag and cardboard benches, just for a quick rest. And here are more of the shapes as they came together, both on walls and on digital screens, and much, much more. And finally, we created Ivan's keynote, which is honestly one of the most amazing design experiences I've ever had, getting to tell the story of our company and our launch with some amazing new products. Seeing him stand in a hall that we created in front of icons that we designed, that's really the power of design. And we made it look easy in the end, but lots and lots of hard work and rehearsals helped us get there. One of our product marketers, David Tibbetts, even sat in the control room to help make sure all the slides came up at the right time, like he was calling a baseball game. And the day was filled with amazing speakers on the edges of design, AI, brand building, and of course the Notion community. So here's one more look at what we created.
Everyone's moving, everyone's vibrant, energy's high, I'm having a good time.
The biggest impression so far has been the opening keynote by Ivan, and it's been really inspiring to see the growth of Notion.
It's historic, right? It's the first time that you've had an in-person event for this tool that is, frankly, just so beloved by a huge community.
The Make with Notion experience has been invigorating.
Inspiring.
Electrifying.
Exhilarating.
So thank you for letting me share 20 years of design with you, and I would be delighted to take some questions now, if you'd like to have them. Thank you. Any questions? Don't be shy.
Hey, first of all, thanks so much for this amazing talk. So many great ideas and projects in such a short amount of time. I also remember starting to discover Notion during COVID, and I was really shocked and refreshed by the black and white or black and off-white colors of it. So I guess you're gonna ask my question. You're gonna guess my question now. But like, what happened? Like, why did you decide to use color and introduce it?
I think it's such a great question, and I mean, I love that part of Notion too. It's almost like a blank, peaceful space for your mind. People talk about loving that quality of the app all the time, and I think we actually are. I think two ideas come to mind for that. The first is Ivan, our CEO, talks about this concept of wanting typography that's almost like water. Like it flows very beautifully. It's not trying to stand out, but it's peaceful and it's resolved. And so I think a lot about that in terms of how we set type, the typefaces we use, trying to make the layouts be relatively calm. And I think that's something that's really important when you're in our app and when you're using our app, that you're not distracted by things that you're able to focus on your work. But I think that's also where this concept of flexibility really is important, because we don't even mandate that the same colors get used across our app and our brand. We have a couple places where those colors intersect, but the colors of a brand are meant to get your attention. They're meant to activate you and persuade you, as Susan Sontag said. And so sometimes we need a little bit more oomph in those situations to invite ourselves to be better known or to be part of your mental landscape and things like that. So I think basically my answer is like the role of color in advertising is different than the role of color in product design. And we try to honor the kind of water-like typography that goes between the two, but we also try to sort of really bring color forward more in some of those more sort of urban environments. Yeah. And it's also that, in situations like billboards or even in some of the painted activations that we had, white can get really dirty. It can be hard. It can get washed out against the sky. So we just kind of realized there's no sense in telling people about Notion if no one notices. So.
Thank you.
Any students here? If you have a student question about career or anything, I'm happy to.
Hi. I just wanted to ask you, because for most of the examples you've put, there's a lot of references, the Finder, the Tintin, the Japanese, the Tangram. How do you remember so many references? When you have to okay, I'm gonna do this, what do you do? You gather them just in your mind, or you how do you do, or with the team?
Oh man, okay, well, a couple thoughts come to mind. I think first of all, sometimes you just know you're doing the right thing. That's just how my brain works. It's actually very hard to run a big team because there's lots of numbers and financials that go with running a big team. And my brain doesn't remember numbers very well at all. My brain remembers images. And so I can remember a poster I saw 20 years ago and exactly what it looked like and what color it was. But I have a hard time remembering how much the budget was sometimes. So I think that's kind of when you know you're doing the right thing in terms of you're working in a visual medium. I remember being an art history student and just seeing an image and immediately remembering who made it or where it came from. So my mind has always kind of been very sensitive to those types of things. I think also as a design critic, I'm also always sort of analyzing images and working with both the analytical and the creative side of my brain at the same time. I don't really know how to separate them. And I think when you're working with a team, I love the concept that Rem Koolhaas talks about of a kind of a curator in the studio or an editor in the studio, that the architects that work at OMA are generating tons and tons of different maquettes and images and drawings and references and things. And he's really helping to cull and make sense of all those things and tell a story. So I think that's kind of a little bit what I'm trying to do is basically look at all the outputs of my team and say which of these is actually meaningful to me and why? And a lot of the way that I respond to that is through images. So sort of oh, this reminds me of Hokusai and the sudden gust of wind. And that's actually, is that what you're trying to do? And people are yes, that's exactly what we're let's play that up. Because I think especially for brand and advertising and things you're trying to provoke an emotional response. And so we have an emotional connection to these experiences from childhood, from color, from using things in the world, and I think you're just always trying to sort of be as authentic to that as you can.
Okay, impressive. Okay, thank you.
Hi. So it's so funny that I'm seeing this talk today because in my team, we're just gathering examples of illustration in different companies because we want to create, we had this problem that we have empty states and they are also, I don't know, they have no personality. So I was gathering, and one of the examples was Notion, of course. And then I noticed that, okay, wait a second. We have a website and we have a marketing team that already is using illustration. And somehow we're trying to do the work. And I have a feeling that in so many occasions when I was working, I work as a product designer, that we were so detached from marketing and they were doing their thing and we were doing our thing. And I wonder if you have any tip or any advice for how to align better marketing and product.
It's the eternal question, right? But it's also such a rich opportunity, I remember one of my managers at Google would always quote I think it was Sergey Brin who would talk about the greatest problems are at the edges of our products, you know? And I think some of the most interesting emotional experiences in creating technology are at the edges of product and marketing, you know? And so I always like go into those spaces and say, okay, this is a moment where we have a minute to tell our story or connect with the user in a different way. One of them that I knew when I first got to Notion would be really hard was like modal windows, like especially when we like launch a new feature or something, the product design team creates a modal window to tell you about that. And I was just like, it's so important to be able to like have marketing and product connected on that. And it's actually a really interesting set of questions that come up around the earlier question of like, how bright should the colors be? Should there be a dark mode? Should we be quieter? Should we be bigger? Should the images connect with the campaign, or should they really just demonstrate the feature? But I think those are really important questions to have as an organization in terms of the way you want to talk to your users and the way you want to inform them. But I think like for something like Notion Faces, I was always very mindful of like the product side of the story. So not just doing a campaign that was like a silly campaign that let you make a face, but actually thinking about that as the particle for your identity in Notion and all of the things around that would come, from like the information about the people graph inside of Notion, how you and your colleagues collaborate and are connected. And I think when you can do that, it makes it feel less frivolous and more relevant, and it also demonstrates a kind of empathy across those lines between product thinking and creative thinking. So I guess those are, I think Nosy is another great example of, what does the touch point look like? It could just be a button. And it kind of is just a button. I mean, in terms of its actual functionality, it's just a button. But that button has so much more life to it and behavior to it when you think carefully about how we bring our brand and our ideas of illustration to that surface. So it's just trying to find like the right opportunities. You don't need to like be in each other's business all the time, but there are certain moments where it really matters and really counts, and it's about finding those moments and designing those experiences together. So.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Actually, I'll say one more thing, which is that in making Nosy, like we had sketches for the character, but Rio, our product design partner, kept putting them in sketches that he was making for AI features. And something about him doing that over and over and over again just naturalized the idea that we would have this character in the app, So a huge credit to him for making it less scary for everyone and just seemed inevitable at the end of the day that that's what we would do, like because no one had seen a mock that did anything else. So I think there's so much in daring people to do new things that is about culture making in terms of technology. You need to make it feel like it's the art of the possible, the coalition of the willing. And without his partnership, we couldn't have made that happen. So.
Hi.
Hi.
I just want to mention that it's also very cool that Notion fosters a community, but also my question was, with these many launches and also campaigns and products and everything, how through design you don't lose track of the essence of Notion? Because for example, I started using it like as a journaling and also like productivity, and also all the people that started using Notion in COVID, like just to, I don't know, like as a hobby or something. But yeah, maybe sometimes it's hard with all these new things coming on. Not to lose the essence of Notion at the end.
I hear what you're saying. Yeah, I think you don't want to have that Photoshop effect where there's just so many buttons and palettes and tools that it doesn't become a tranquil experience. It becomes a very confusing experience, right? So I think we have a responsibility to keep creating value for you in the things that we launch and making them intuitive and relevant. And I also think, the needs of teams are really different than the needs of individuals. And I think that really comes through in a lot of our newer launches. Like we had a launch this week, and we deliberately called it AI for work because we didn't want people to be confused and think as an individual solo user organizing recipes or, photo inspiration, a great tool for organizing images is Notion. Photo inspiration, we didn't want people to be confused that they needed to use AI to do that if they didn't want to, But at work, it's incredible to be able to search across all of your different apps that are connected in Notion from Notion, or to be able to synthesize meeting notes using audio transcription. So those types of things are really useful for people working in teams. Like if you're not having meetings, then you don't need that feature, if you're just using Notion for a note-taking app. So I think this idea of making it as simple as possible for the people that need it to be simple and making the enhancement and the path toward enhancement really clear for teams is important to us. And creating that distinction so that our passionate individual users don't get confused or kind of feel like disrupted by that. So.
Thank you.
Hi. Just here.
Hello.
Hello. I think we all see a space, an empty space, when you are presenting the Café Notion and all the cities, which means my questions. When Barcelona?
I love it. Well, I was just in Dublin with our European team a couple days before this, and they were extremely excited that I was coming here. They were like, Barcelona is such an important city. We have a passionate user base. They were like, can you do a Notion meetup too while you're there? I would love to do that. I wish I was here for longer. But we will do more in Barcelona, I'm sure. And I know that it's on our radar in a big way. So stay tuned.
Hey, first of all, thank you for your talk. It was very excited. My question is about personalization, because you already showed the Notion faces and your AI assistant. Maybe you can share some specific plans. Maybe I'm like a user in nearest future can combine Notion faces with personal AI assistant and my knowledge base and rack in Notion, for example.
I think it's a great idea. I can't say too much more than that, but I think it's something that's on our mind in terms of, how we allow you to do more with the agents and experiences you build, and how and where and how much to express that through the IP or the assets that I was showing you. So, can you modify Nosy? Can you create your own Nosy? Is it an agent? I think those are all really relevant questions.
Hello. Hi, Rob.
Hello.
Thank you for sharing your amazing work. My question for you is, how do you deal with designer's block? Like when you don't know how to even start?
That is such a good question. And honestly, I know it seems like I could talk for 2 more hours, but it is, sometimes I get blocked all the time. And sometimes I'm like, I don't know how to solve this problem. The path to get Notion faces out was a huge challenge. For a long period of time, we really thought we'd have to solve this with AI, or we have to figure out a way to do this with AI, because there's so many illustrations to make, and we just didn't know how to get it to users. And they were really wanting it. They kept telling us they really wanted it. And so we were kind of blocked. That was an example of what's the path? How do we get through? I think that sometimes that's where leadership is really important and transformative, where you just say, listen, we've all got to hold hands and hire 20 illustrators to help us draw all these pieces, and we're going to have to teach them how we draw and calibrate them so that they can interpret our style for us, and we're going to handpick them all and be on a call with them every day and review things and review them with our employee engagement teams to make sure they're representative and inclusive and all these different things. And I think sometimes when you encounter that sort of block, it's because you're facing a really hard or complex or ambiguous problem. And to me, it's number one, is an important problem, do you have to solve it? And if it is, work the problem, chip away at it, what would it mean for us to do 20 faces this week? I think that's it's a little bit of effort, I think, is sometimes how you get through the block. But I also think walking away from it for a little while can be really useful too. And I remember when I was writing School Days, the essay for Graphic Design Now in Production about, I think I did 11 or 12 drafts of it, and there was one point where I was just like, I'm never going to finish this. I don't know how to finish this. I don't know even what I'm trying to say anymore. But I remember putting it away for a weekend and coming back, rereading it with a clear head, and suddenly sort of a couple sentences helped me finish the project. So I think just monitoring your energy level. You're a person. You have a human system that's powering your creativity. I think being really sensitive to that and not letting yourself off the hook when you need to work harder or push through. Letting yourself off the hook when it's not that important, and giving yourself a break when you need to recharge and come back at the problem with a new energy. So I know that's not profound, but that's true to me.
Helpful. Thank you so much.
Okay. Do we one more, or we're done? We're done. Okay. Thank you, guys. Great to see you. Thank you, Barcelona.